Welcome to episode 30 of The Pulse of Physiology. I'm your host, Dr. Jim Davis, and today we're diving into the fundamental principles of skeletal muscle contraction. Understanding how muscles contract at the cellular level helps us make sense of movements ranging from simple reflexes to complex athletic performance. In our next episode, we'll expand on this by discussing whole muscle contraction, but for now, let's break down the mechanics of tension generation, the phases of a muscle twitch, and how frequency and intensity affect contraction strength. Before we get into the details of a muscle contraction, it's important to distinguish between two key terms, tension and contraction. Tension refers to the amount of overlap between actin and myosin in a muscle fiber, which ultimately determines the force that muscles can generate. If you've been to my class, remember the answer to muscular physiology is cross bridges. When in doubt, take it back to cross bridges. And so when we have greater tension, we usually have a greater number of cross bridges. Now, contraction is the process of generating that tension, but, and this is important, it doesn't necessarily mean the muscle shortens. A muscle can contract isometrically, which means without changing its length, or isotonically, which means changing length while generating force. But we'll get into that more in the next episode. A muscle twitch is a single contraction-relaxation cycle in response to a stimulus. This cycle consists of three distinct phases: the latent period, the contraction period, and the relaxation period. The latent period is the short delay between stimulus application and contraction onset. The action potential will travel along the sarcolemma down the T-tubules and trigger calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And refer back to our excitation-contraction coupling episode if you have questions. No force is produced yet, but this phase prepares the muscle fiber for contraction. During the contraction period, calcium binds to troponin, which shifts tropomyosin and exposes myosin binding sites on actin. This allows cross-bridge cycling to occur where the sarcomere shortens and is able to generate tension. This phase will last as long as calcium remains in the sarcoplasm and ATP is available for cycling. Finally, we end with the relaxation period. During this period, calcium is actively pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum by the sarcoendoplasmic reticulum calcium ATPase pump, or SERCA. Ultimately, this reduces the amount of calcium that's available to bind to troponin. As a result, cross-bridge cycling ceases and tension decreases. This allows the muscle fiber to return to its resting state. A myogram is a graphical representation of a muscle twitch that you might see in lab. And the myogram can display these three phases in response to a single stimulus. Now, muscle contractions can be graded, meaning their force can vary based on how frequently a muscle is stimulated. Three key patterns arise when stimulus frequency increases. That's TREP, also known as the staircase effect, summation, and finally tetanus. When stimuli are applied at a constant low frequency, each successive contraction generates slightly more tension than the previous one. This is called TREP. TREP occurs because calcium accumulates in the sarcoplasm, making cross-bridge cycling more efficient. The muscle fully relaxes between stimuli, making it distinct from summation. Then there's summation. If a new stimulus arrives before the muscle has fully relaxed, the new contraction begins at a higher tension level. This happens because some calcium from the previous contraction remains in the sarcoplasm, allowing for more cross-bridge formation. Summation results in stronger contractions and occurs at moderate frequencies of stimulation. Now, tetanus occurs if stimuli arrive rapidly enough. In this case, the muscle does not relax at all between contractions, which leads to a sustained maximal contraction. That's tetanus. Incomplete tetanus occurs when small relaxation phases still exist between contractions. Complete tetanus, on the other hand, happens when relaxation is completely eliminated and a smooth, sustained contraction is maintained. This is not typically observed in voluntary muscle contractions, but it is critical in maintaining posture and performing high-force activities. Now, not all muscle fibers in a muscle contract at once. Instead, motor units are recruited in a predictable order depending on the intensity of the stimulus, and we alluded to this when we were talking about skeletal muscle fiber types. If we're below threshold, meaning the stimulus is too weak to reach threshold, no motor units are activated and no tension is produced. However, as we increase stimulus intensity, more motor units will reach threshold, which means they will be recruited and the force of contraction will increase. And at high stimulus intensities, all available motor units are recruited, meaning the muscle generates its maximum possible tension. This follows the size principle, where smaller motor units, which contain slow, oxidative fibers, are recruited first, followed by larger motor units, which contain fast glycolytic fibers, as force demand increases. This ensures efficiency in muscle use, conserving energy when only low-force contractions are needed. So let's summarize with 4 key takeaways. Tension refers to the force generated by a muscle, while contraction is the process of generating that force, whether or not the muscle shortens. A muscle twitch consists of latent, contraction, and relaxation periods, which can be visualized on a myogram. Stimulus frequency determines contraction strength, with TREP, summation, and tetanus increasing force production as frequency rises. Stimulus intensity affects the number of motor units recruited following the size principle, from small to large. And so that's it for episode 30 of Pulse of Physiology. I hope this episode has provided a foundation for understanding how skeletal muscle contraction occurs at the cellular level. Join me next time where we'll discuss whole muscle contraction and how individual muscle fibers work together to generate force. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay curious.